This week on To the Contrary.
First, a list of the most effective CEOs, but where are the women? Then, egg freezing, the latest perk for female employees. Behind the headlines, sexual assault in the military, male victims speak out.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, women CEOs.
More evidence that women still have a long way to go in the business world. The Harvard Business Review released its list of the 100 most effective CEOs in the world. Only 2 women were on that list, Carol Meyrowitz of TJX Companies and Deborah Cafaro from Ventus. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos earned the top spot. Review researchers say they did a purely statistical analysis of how the CEOs performed, delivering solid results over the long run. The analysis found women are twice as likely as men to become CEOs as an outside hire, but CEO candidates from within a company perform better. Only 3% of the CEOs studied were women.
So, Patricia Sosa, with many other studies showing women drive higher profits when they're in management, why are those findings not reflected here?
Well, why are we surprised? If men are in charge of selecting the CEOs of these companies, why are we surprised that men are getting the job?
Well, I think there are more male CEOs, so when you have out of your top 100, you're going to end up with fewer females.
Well, and women are only 3% to begin with, and we also know that the decision for what to measure by was strictly based on return to investors. And since women are much more likely to be hired to lead companies in trouble, then they're also less likely to be the ones that have the highest return.
And the report also highlights that a lot of the CEOs rose from the ranks within the organization or the companies, whereas a lot of female CEOs tended to come in from the outside. So perhaps we need to really encourage our younger women staffers to really stay in their companies and see that they can rise to the top.
So you're saying then that women are more like look at Indra Nooyi at Pepsi, where they haven't done great, as I recall, financially since she's been there. But again, it was a turnaround effort that she was brought in for.
And Marissa Mayer at Yahoo, for example, was brought in to turn around. Frequently, the women are brought in after the company is in a mess, and they're trying something new, hiring a woman. So if you're...
Is that true at GM? With Mary Barra?
Oh, I would say that that's pretty clearly is the case. And so if your measure of top CEO is strictly and only return on investment, as it was here, then you're not going to see the turnaround companies, and those have many more women in them.
So then you're saying what we should be doing is to fix those odds is get more CEOs who are just promoted through the ranks as opposed to women brought in from outside.
Or change the measurements about how you decide.
Look at different measurements. In other words, the people who wrote this article decided that they were going to rank the top 100 CEOs based on a measure that they chose. And I'm saying that's not the right measure if you're going to capture what women are accomplishing.
Well, the thing
but the other side of it is I think no matter what measure you use, and I agree, let's do something besides just how much money does a company make, though that is an important measurement.
It is.
But you know, even if you broaden it out, the reality is there are more male CEOs running companies. And so you're, you know, in a list of anybody's top 100, whether it's Fortune or Harvard Business Review, whoever it happens to be, you're going to end up with more men because there are just a lot more men in that job.
Well, I think everybody expected more men.
But not,
they were
not
not
98 more men.
expecting 98% men.
Right.
There's a distinction.
And I think that is a point, Bonnie, that I wanted to make, is we're not making progress. Okay, we're making some progress. I think there's another list that have 15 women of the top 100, not this top 100. But it's a long way to go when we're, 50% of the market? In some of these companies, we're like the main consumers. Why it's taking so long? And, you know, they talk about mentoring, which is a good thing. We talk helping women stay in their job for longer, which is a good thing. But we're still making no progress. What's going on here?
It's not that we're not making progress. I mean, sure, the numbers aren't equal, but there's a choice involved here. There are a lot of young women who don't want to be in a C-suite, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think what's great about us is that we can choose whether we want to progress in our careers or maybe start a different career or just leave the marketplace entirely.
It's interesting
But that's
that
not
you're
what you
saying
hear.
that, Patrice, because that's what conservatives were saying 20 and 30 years ago. And I thought younger conservatives saw that, yeah, there are a lot of women who don't want to be CEOs. Duh. There are also tons of men who are very happy pumping gas for a living. So, but there's still, that doesn't mean that there isn't a relatively equal percentage of ambitious young women and ambitious young men.
Well, and that's true, but that's, again, I think it goes back to the choices that we make. And, whether we choose to continue to progress in our careers or whether we decide to do something different. I don't think
Does it have to be an either or anymore?
It does. So there are some factors that come into play as a young woman where, when you look at fertility rates, for example, if you want to have a family, you're going to probably have to make some tough choices in your career. And that's realistic.
I think you need to pressure.
We're almost out of time. And Kim, I want to ask you. So what should have been included on this list that would have evened it out for the women who are turnaround artists?
Well, clearly, if you're only looking at return to the investors over the past 3 to 5 years, the women who are turning their companies around are not going to have much return until the end.
But so I'm saying, what I'm asking you,
progress, at change, at how much improvement there has been in return on investment.
As opposed to just absolute return on investment. All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay. From CEOs to companies and family planning.
2 Silicon Valley companies believe they've found a way to help bridge the gender gap in technology. Apple and Facebook are now offering to pay for female employees to freeze their eggs. In an effort to attract more women, these companies say egg freezing gives women more flexibility to build careers and choose when to have children. Some critics argue this markets false hope disguised as female empowerment to women. They also charge it's an attempt to avoid policies such as paid family leave, childcare, and flex time.
So Genevieve, which is it? Because actually Facebook and Google are offering paid family leave and flex time, or one of them is at least, and then also, on-site daycare and things like that.
Right. Well, which are great policies for people who already have kids. But I think what they're recognizing is that what we talked about in the last segment, for young women who say, you know what, I really want to be in a career, I want to move up the ladder, I may not want to take time out right now to have a family, this is a way you could maybe try to postpone that. And I think, if they want to do it, I don't ethically have a problem with it. The problem I do have is that I do think it sends a message that you can postpone and things will be fine. And we all know the medicine doesn't tell us that. So it's one of those kind of things of just let's give people full information of what you may be postponing and the fact that it won't just be there for you, waiting for you when you're 35 like you think it might be.
And in vitro rates.
The rates are not, they're low. That's right.
And that's not with frozen eggs.
I think that we're reading too much into it. I think that is one of the issues. I think they're just showing that they care about women, that they want to give them all the benefits that they could possibly give them. And this is one of the benefits that for a long time was considered research, and now it's considered standard care. It does improve your chances. It's not perfect, but it does improve your chances. As somebody that did in vitro, and I speak publicly about it, if you do it, if you retract the egg before you're 35 or 37, that quality of that egg is much higher. So I think it's a real benefit. I don't think it's anything to do. I don't think it's a hidden agenda to force women into not having kids at 35 so they can become the CEO. I think it's just another benefit that they want to give them.
Well, and I think it demonstrates that women are being valued in the marketplace in a different way than we have been in the past. But going back to Genevieve's point, I think it does send kind of a signal to my generation that, yeah, it's okay for you to give 10, 20 years of your life to a company or to progressing in your career, and you'll be all right if you want to start a family. And that's not realistic.
Tell me why.
Because of the fertility rates, and there are lots of things that come into play. I mean, when you talk about freezing eggs, it's an expensive process. So even if you do have someone willing to pay for it, it's painful, and then it may not work. And so what do you have then? You've had a kind of a nice experiment, but unfortunately, you're still in the same place that you were before.
And let's mention, what's the impact on poor women who are never going to work for Facebook or Google anyway? Because I had dinner this week with the son of a friend who's got a computer startup going in San Francisco, and he told me that the average starting pay, not just at Google and Facebook, but for all these companies in San Francisco for out-of-school computer engineers is $180,000 a year. They're doing better than kids out of Harvard Law School are.
Sure.
So obviously, this is not going to help a woman cleaning toilets in somebody's house.
And it really does become almost irrelevant when you are looking at the kind of benefits that a Google or a Facebook offers to their employees. You're also looking at the kind of pay they offer to their employees, and it's off the charts. It really has no relationship with reality. If we had more companies that employ more people who had on-site daycare, who had paid family leave, who had other options so that younger women can have families and can remain in the workforce if that's what they choose to do, that's where you're going to make the difference, not looking at a couple of very elite companies that have high pay and extraordinary benefits.
But they'll get good PR out of this, which I think generally they have. There have been some critiques of it. But I also think it goes to trying to say, again, you can have it all. And I think we just have to realize people do have to make some choices in life. And they're not all equal. They don't all have equal outcomes. But, we don't all measure success by the same thing either. Just being a CEO, maybe some people don't think that's the ultimate success rate.
Plenty of people don't.
Plenty of people don't. And so, again, I think it comes back to trying to suggest you can do all these things, but I think the message, even though not everybody's working for Google and Facebook, women should know just freezing your eggs is not going to guarantee you children late in your 30s.
All right, behind the headlines. Male sexual assault survivors. A new Department of Defense report shows that sexual assault in the military is more prevalent against men than against women. Yet the public remains largely unaware of the struggle male survivors face and the fact that 40% of men, according to one survey, are raped by women. To the contrary, spoke with 4 male survivors who hope that by sharing their stories, they can change the culture and help others.
I was in his room and I remember how a friendly touch went to me being frozen and on my back.
She was in control of the situation. There was nothing I was going to do. When I moved, she yelled at me. This definitely her show. Anything that she wanted to do was going to happen.
We were in a remote section of the naval station, and he basically used a weapon to force me to submit to whatever he wanted to do.
For me, my connection to the organization, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse myself.
Bob Hunter, James Landreth, Brian Lewis, and Chris Anderson all survived sexual assault, 3 in the military. Now they've turned to advocacy. They all agree that the public needs to be better educated before this problem can be resolved. The first step is for people to even acknowledge that men can actually be raped by women.
It is possible for a man to complete a sexual act even under a sense of duress, even if they're psychologically unwilling or traumatized at that moment.
It's not just a female problem. And even though there are more men raped in the military, it still seems like it's just a woman's issue, and it's not. It's anybody.
Partly due to this misconception, it is sometimes difficult for survivors' allegations to be taken seriously.
Rape culture, I get it now. They really blame the victim.
When I attempted to report it, my chain of command told me that I was not to push the matter any further.
Not only was Lewis's story disbelieved, he was dishonorably discharged due to what the military dubbed a personality disorder.
As you go through life, you will be forced to explain to every employer, to every person that inquires about your discharge, why you have less than a fully honorable discharge. And that shouldn't be on me. That should be on the Navy to say, we were wrong, we admit it, and we want to make it right.
Experts say men forego reporting the crime for fear that they won't find justice. Landreth says he was one such case.
There was no way I was going to report it. There was no good that was going to come of it. I would have been laughed at. I would have been taunted. I probably would have been looking at a dishonorable discharge.
Landreth was drugged by a pregnant woman and then attacked.
I believe she slipped something into one of the last couple drinks she got me. I wake up at some point during the middle of the night and she's on top of me. I don't recall exactly anything before that because I was out.
Landreth has been coping with the effects of the attack ever since. Today, he is vice president for MRMST, an advocacy group for male survivors of sexual assault in the military. His decision not to report the incident is not uncommon. According to survivors and advocates, the military culture specifically can be a roadblock to justice.
You have within the military a climate and a culture that up until recently has been very unwilling to address sexual violence at all within the ranks.
That's why many advocates and survivors hope prosecution of perpetrators is taken out of the military chain of command.
The problem is something like this pops up and it's on a commander's plate, and suddenly they have a really big problem. They're trying to do the best job they can and get promoted. This is a big giant black eye to their command. It needs to be completely out of the chain of command. It needs to be into a separate agency that can still answer to DoD, but not necessarily be controlled in any way.
The Department of Veterans Affairs is tasked with helping survivors heal. According to Susan McCutcheon, the National Director for Military Sexual Trauma, no veteran is turned away.
Every veteran who comes to VA for healthcare services is screened for experiences of military sexual trauma. And by that, we ask two different questions. One that addresses sexual assault and the other that addresses sexual harassment. And if the veteran answers yes to one or both of those questions, they are eligible for free health care.
The most common, but by no means only, affliction survivors face is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Hunter lives with this condition and depends partly on health care from the VA to manage his symptoms.
It's a mental health issue, but with PTSD, there are also physiological complications.
Hunter repressed the memory of his attack for 32 years. He's now dealing with the aftermath of that painful event.
For the first 4 months, 4.5 months, I was drunk every day. I had no coping skills. I cried a lot. I went from being very sociable to nothing. I knew that being quiet would be death. There are resources for men that are as simple as looking up male sexual trauma. We will definitely take you in and we will help you much the same way I got helped.
Male survivors are in need of organizations that provide services on a full-time basis.
There are resources out there, of course. MrMST.org, 1in6.org for male survivors of child sexual abuse. There are several online discussion groups, AfterSilence.org, Pandora's Aquarium, Pandys, PANDYS.org. There are several Facebook groups. Some are open, some are closed. And of course, there's MaleSurvivor.org as well.
Chris's organization, MaleSurvivor.org, is hosting an international conference for men who've survived sexual trauma in Newark, New Jersey, from October 31st through November 2nd this year.
When survivors are able to access support, when we are heard, when we're believed, and when we're able to access proper mental health resources, when we're responded to adequately by the criminal justice system, it's absolutely possible for healing to take place.
Just how prevalent are female assaults on male survivors? We don't really know. One report by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which surveyed DOD's 2010 paper and other data, reported, quote, male victims indicated their perpetrator was slightly more likely to be female at 40% than male at 35%. The rest, or 25%, did not want to indicate the gender of the assailant. Dr. Gary Barker of Promundo explains the reason for the lack of information on females assaulting males.
Whether it's in the U.S. and in the military or outside, Typically, more of it happens to women and girls, but we're not sure because we've been asking for so long about the ways it happens to women and girls, and we need to, but we've not been asking as much about the ways that it happens to men and boys.
So first of all, Kim Gandy, there's this data question. I mean, we don't really know. Secondly, I want to point out you used to run National Organization for Women. You now run the largest group fighting domestic violence in this country. As a woman, I was shocked beyond belief to find out, producing this story, that women can rape men. And what I did find out was that, to be blunt, the male organ responds whether it's as a result of stress, of duress, or of desire. Mm-hmm. How is it that women can be raping men? I never heard of such a thing. And how big a problem have you found it to be with your background?
Well, certainly we know that men are sexually assaulted. It's approximately 1 in 6 men. It's actually smaller than that in the military, strangely enough. 1 in 25 is reported in the military. But we do know that men are sexually assaulted. The numbers that I've seen have always indicated that it is much more likely to be male-on-male assault than female-on-male assault, but some of them definitely are female-on-male assaults. I'm guessing that 20%, 25% that they didn't want to reveal is because they did not want to reveal a homosexual assault. So it's probably consistent with the numbers that we've seen. But certainly men can be assaulted by women by using drugs and the like.
But what drives these women? That's my question.
You know, I think the ability to have control over another person, and you see that in the military. It's rare for women to be in a position of control over men, so you don't see it very often, but in the military, certainly that can happen. There are people who will abuse their power in whatever walk of life they are, and women are not exempt from that. Women are far less likely to because they're far less likely to have power. But when they do have power, some of them will abuse it just like men do.
And you know, I'm thinking that it's really also the evolution of culture, because in so many culture, a man will not say, I've ever been raped by a woman because I always want to have sex with a woman. And I think it's a good thing that they're publicly saying, you know, I did something I didn't want to do. Yeah. And create awareness that, yes, that men also need to be respected, not only women. And I agree with him that a lot of the degree of the abuse we're seeing in the military is because the women are in a position of power. So you see that dynamic being replicated.
Well, and I think, I mean, with rape, I mean, that's what I think, whether it's men raping women or in some of these cases, women raping men, it's not usually an act of, well, I just really was fantasizing about you. It's an act of power. I mean, it's aggression. And so I think you're probably...
And a lot of these women were victims of child sexual abuse themselves, so it might be acting out
in some form. That's right. Well, and I think, I mean, look, what this story shows, and you see it any other time that we've talked about, I mean, just how ugly this is and what a dramatic effect it has on people for years. I mean, one of these guys here didn't talk about it for what, 25 years?
32 years.
32 years. I mean, it just shows, not that will necessarily stop people, but just the effect something like that has on a person, whether you're a man or a woman.
And I wonder about the military. You know, you mentioned that rates of violence, of sexual assault are lower in the military than the general public. On the other hand, in the military, you're trained to kill. I mean, even if you're in an office job, it's all about, you know, defending this country and killing enemies. How do you balance what the military's main function is against not letting that training get into the head of some people who are misperceive it to use it in their personal lives?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it comes down to what values that we're instilling in our soldiers. And there's both the side of we need to, you know, go after the enemy, but there's also the side of respect for individuals and every person. And so whether that's your fellow comrade or even when we take this out of the military and just into regular society, how we treat one another, there has to be more respect in our society and in our culture, and we've lost something there.
Are there lessons, last question to you, Kim, lessons to be learned from this whole recent big push we've seen by the White House and everywhere else to end campus assaults, campus rape for the military? Should they pick up some of this messaging?
Yeah, I think that the addressing of this issue to institutions, whether it's a university or whether it's a branch of the military, says that institutions have a responsibility, that they have to address these issues. It's not just the fault or the responsibility of the victim to have avoided the situation or not gone here or been there, as has been so long the case, where what was she wearing? Why was she in that location? Why did she have anything to drink? She had a beer. Oh, well, it must be her fault. That's something that we are starting to change. It's still out there, but we're starting to make a difference, and that will change things.
All right, that's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/tothecontrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.